Okay, so back to BlenderBIM, right? Let's have a look at what we got here. So,
Yeah, at this pace, we'll need 10 episodes to get
that's okay. That's okay.
but
That's okay.
for me,
I
it's
don't mind.
fine.
Yeah, for me as well.
Awesome.
So, all right. So we talked about some of the things we might look at. We said, one thing we could do at the start is if we click on project info, look at IFC debug. So here you'll have the currently loaded IFC file on that's part of this Blender project, and you have this little tick item here that says validate IFC file. So essentially, this does what XBIM Explorer does. It looks at your IFC file and reports back any errors, in the syntax or in the construction of any of the entities. And you can also use this, then look at the report that's generated by this to also understand whether your file has issues or not. So just as a mention there. So once I've validated, what I like to do is then I go on IFC collaboration here, and there's something called IFC Selector. So IFC Selector is also code that was written, I think, by Dion, maybe even Thomas as well. And what I did is I decided, I really like this IFC Selector. I want to make a UI for this. So this is something I'm happy that I contributed to. No worries. What it essentially allows you to do is it allows you to make very complex selection groups or filters for the model, but they can also be simple if you want as well. So one thing I might do is I'll say I want to filter by the IFC classes in the model. So I'll say, okay, show me all the IFC walls in the project, right? And I'll click on that, and it just automatically filters the entire model. And the reason why I do this is I like to look at the usual suspects in a model. I want to look at, the walls, the slabs, the columns, the beams, and maybe, any other elements that are relevant to my project, And in construction, often we're first looking at the structural works. So in initial phase, I'm really focused on these raw, these big structural elements. And one thing I want to do is, especially with wall, is check that actually all these elements look like walls. One common mistake that happens, well, it's not really a mistake, I think it's just kind of a preference of users in Revit, is when they're modeling foundations and they're modeling ply footings and strip beams, it's easier for them to use the wall tool in Revit than it is
to use slab or padding.
Yeah. And then what happens is because, you can't override, I think, some of these base classes in Revit. I'm no Revit expert. I'm just kind of regurgitating what's been told to me by some of the Revit users. You can't override this. And what happens is, you'll see a bunch of walls here. And then when you look at the bottom, you'll see also foundation elements that are also IFC wall. And obviously, this is something you want to correct. Like you don't want to use it, especially if you're using, calculation software that relies on templates. So, in Europe, in Central Europe, big software is I2, right? And in I2, the calculation of quantities is based quite directly on what kind of type it is, what kind of element it is, So depending on if it's a wall or a beam, if you calculate the side area, the calculated quantity might actually be totally different. So it's very important that you can have the right types. It's also very important from a semantic point of view. I want to be able to classify my model, and I want to automate some things, and I want to know that IFC walls are actually walls and not beams or whatever,
I agree. Yeah. I encountered this. I've seen this. I've witnessed this issue actually. I've seen some beams made as walls, exported to IFC as walls. And that was not something, it should not be like that, right?
Fair enough. So maybe then I'll focus then on just this part, IFC Selector, because I think it's something that's interesting for BlenderBIM users, kind of to make their life easier.
Sure.
Next thing I'll do is the usual suspect. I'll search for building element proxy. I'll see if there's anything there. So thankfully, there's no building element proxy in this model. Usually what I do though, if there's a building element proxy, and it shouldn't be, I'll send a death threat to the architect or something like that, just so they know that they shouldn't. No, I'm kidding. I'll just mark this and I'll probably make a BCF, file, or I'll talk to maybe the project manager of the project and be like, look, why are these elements building element proxy, when they quite clearly could be, something else.
Well, if you have as a requirement that the delivery should happen in IFC4, then if not, then you are in trouble. Then you will end up with more elements like that.
Oh, but I mean, sometimes I can understand that there are cases where building an element proxy is totally fine, in my opinion. But, when it's a wall or when it's a pipe, it shouldn't be a bloody element proxy,
Yeah, I completely agree.
But we can do some cool stuff with IC selector. So as I said, it can get really, really complicated, or it can get really interesting if you want. So as a first step, we say, we want, IC wall.
But Dion did something similar. We did that tutorial together, but he used something else. He used other tool to select this item. So what you are showing, it's a bit more user friendly, right?
Yeah, and Dion is a wizard. Like you look at his fingers as he's hotkeying through the model, and it's kind of like, how does he even have any calluses left? But if you want to do more complicated queries, I don't think you can avoid using this, because there's only so much hotkeys can get you, and not everyone's gonna just memorize all these hotkeys, right? So so let's say, okay, IC wall. When I do that, I get all the IC walls. That's fine, but what if I want to refine this a little bit further? I can look at all IFC walls, and then I can look, into the property sets of the walls. So I have a property set, and when I go here, it shows me a list of all property sets that are found in the model, right? So let's say it's an ArchiCAD model. I go to pset, ArchiCAD properties, and then it shows me all the properties in this pset that are found in the model, right? And then what do we do? Let's find what's interesting here. What can we try and use that maybe even there, right? And then I have a few kind of conditional operators. I can say, give me all IFC walls where this pset, ArchiCAD properties and property ebene is equal to a certain value. So I'm going to find, let's say, just an example value, and just so we can see. Right, so Außenwände, perfect. So what
do
I
you
want to do...
speak German, by the way?
Yeah,
Did you learn
German? Yeah, I learned German. Especially when I got to Germany, and my German was really bad, and I think in the meantime it's gotten a lot better. So I work in German every day, so it should be okay.
Congrats.
I'll podcast with Thomas Zwielen next time. If he lets me, if I mispronounce his name, maybe he won't want to talk to me. So IFC wall, and we want to also see IFC walls when this property is equal to this value. So if I do that now, it should now show me only the external walls. Außenwände means external walls in German. So as you can see, I've combined properties, but that's not all. I can start combining and start doing some other funky stuff. So that's one condition, right? And I want to also add in, and I'm going to say, only show me all these elements when the building story is equal to Erdgeschoss, which is the ground floor, right? And I do that, and you can see, right?
That's
I only
cool.
have the ground floor, right? And this allows you to quickly create these queries. And you'll notice that when I click on these elements, you have this syntax that's generated. So basically what my little add-in does, it allows you to have a UI, and then it generates IFC selector syntax that you can use then wherever else you want. Maybe you're writing your own scripts, maybe you want to use it later, right? And not only that, maybe this is something that you want to be able to use frequently. You can just click on Save Query and say, I want to save it as BIMvoice, right? Oops. I save it as BIMvoice. And you see now when I click on Load Query, I have it here. Right? And I can just click here, Load Query, and it copies it here. So I'll show you now what it looks like when you start fresh, right? And now this stuff is here. Oops, let's delete this. You go here on Load Query, and you can just select Load Query, and it just loads the query that you had before. So this way you can kind of save different selections. That's one way of doing it. The better way of doing it is to add it to an IFC group. So when you do that, you can then create an IFC group. So this is now real IFC. The first option was just really saving it locally or saving it in the Blender project. And this is now saving the selection to IFC. So I'm going to call this, just call it BIMvoice again, just as an example, right? And what does that mean? So if I now show all the objects again, and in IFC IFC project setup, IFC groups, you see now that there's a group in the project, and it wasn't one there before. So when I click on this, it shows unnamed. Not sure why it shows unnamed, but let's try and do that again. I think this is basically the group I just created. And if I now click on this item, select group elements, it selects the elements that you see that I had in the IFC selector query. So what it means is that you can now save all your selections, all your dynamic selection groups to IFC groups. And that means that you can then share it with anybody you want, any partner, anyone else who's using BlenderBIM, and they can have these selections all on their own. Yeah, we just created a group, BIMvoice, and one more thing, when it has, you'll have potentially a lot of IFC groups in a project. Groups are just great ways, containers basically, to store objects, right? When you see a little star icon in front of the name of a group, it means it's a dynamic group. So it means that, if your model changes, if the walls in the model change, you can just click on this icon and say update group, and it'll recheck which objects apply to that group, And if you click on edit, you'll see here in the description, there's the syntax for the selector, and it's basically contained within 2 selector tags. That's one thing I just wanted to show. And then basically I just wanted to say to anybody that's looking at this and wants to know more about IFC selector, the best way is to just play around. You have IFC class, you have spatial element where you can, filter by all the different kinds of spatial elements in an IFC model. You have element type, which means you can look at, which elements are of a certain type. And then, you can just look at things like global ID.
Who would need that? Nobody's looking for global ID, I think.
I'll show you later actually use cases for that. There are use cases where you might, if you're looking at IFC diff, which is something we'll look at another time, Petru. But if you do that, sometimes you get GUIDs of objects that are changed, and it's nice to just be able to paste them here and quickly filter them out in the model.
So global ID is GUID, right? Is the same thing.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That sounds very good. If you go back to that interface, I have I talked to Yasin about this as well, and he said that those buttons right there, like that click, that button to select the items that you use, those are not very easy to understand what is there. Isn't it possible to add some, I don't know, some text? Like you get that text when you hover over it, right?
Yeah.
Is that descriptive enough? Is that understandable? Because I encountered that issue with Yasin, and there was nothing like, I don't know what you mean with that, So
it's an interesting topic. I mean, and the thing is, the answer varies depending on who you ask. It's an open source community, and some people like the button, some people hate the button, some people like the UI, some people hate the UI. It's not something that's easy to really answer or to address. I think if someone has a better idea for how this should be, then by all means, set up an issue and maybe make a suggestion.
But that name right there, you chose that name right there when you created the interface, right? Filter model elements. Filter model elements based on selection. Okay.
Right.
If you click on that, so click on it and show me what it does.
Okay, so this one, if you look, it says in the bottom, I should maybe actually update this, but it says in the bottom right, option select. Then if I go on the other one, it says option isolate, and then we have option hide, and then option unhide all elements. So if I click this, it hides all the elements. If I click on just select, it only, oops, that's wrong. Let me, IFC wall. So IFC wall, it selects all the walls. If I say isolate, it shows me these elements. And then if I say
so that is isolate. The stuff you used so far, it's isolate to show you only the items the object that you selected, right?
Exactly. But you can also remove things. So one thing I like to do is IFC space. I quickly take that and then I'll hide them from the model. And that means I can see inside without having all these IFC spaces and all that, right? But yeah, I mean, if you have a better idea for this, sure. I mean,
no, like I said, if you can read there and it makes sense, I think I'm not sure. I might be wrong about this, but for that specific stuff, I was looking at the 4D stuff, and it was not. I could not understand what buttons should I use for what. But I maybe you have here the text, and it's more self-explaining. Yeah. But let's close this chat with another question about what you cannot do with was it XBIM and BlenderBIM combined when it comes to quality assurance, quality check of an IFC export. Is there anything else that you cannot do with this, but you can do with Solibri or with other tools?
Okay, well, firstly, I'd break it up into two parts. And first part, I'd like to say what BlenderBIM does with quality that other software absolutely can't, or doesn't even come close to. And then two, what it's maybe missing, but can be filled by other open source software. So, in the quality department, no other software or no other library on the market can really analyze an IC file to the detail that IC OpenShell can. I mean, you can really get into the nitty gritty and start picking apart really line by line all the IC elements. And I wanted to actually show some of this, but we'll do that in another session.
Yeah.
But you can go so detailed here that you really understand what's going on with the model. But there are other concepts of quality that you can't check, at least at the moment, with BlenderBIM, and that's when it comes to things like fire escape routes, code conformity. I don't mean programming code. I mean like the standards of a local country, right? Yeah. There's no way Blender or IFC OpenShell can do that on its own. However, you have things like topologic BIM. If you should probably have I think it's Wasim Jabba on.
I had him as a guest. Yeah, okay, but I did not I did not wrap around my brain around that tool. It's still I did not set time to use it, but the use case for it is very much there. What I struggled with was that the code was like the nodes in Sverchok was changing all the time, and there was not a documentation yet for that. And it was I don't know, maybe now I think he was working and on the documentation, and I think he was supposed to have something by the end of the summer, but I did not check since I talked to him.
Yeah, maybe at some point in the near future, they can kind of stabilize the code base and start running documentation. But and I'm not going to pretend I understand the code. I've only looked at it conceptually, but that's going to be a powerhouse really. Also look at some of the recent update that Thomas Kreinen posted, I think, on Twitter. He's talking about this voxelization toolkit, and all of a sudden you start having some really interesting toolkits that just need to be combined in a user-friendly way. Yeah. And once you do that, I don't see really any proprietary software standing
that can come even close. Yeah, I agree.
Close, really. Yeah, I mean,
but you need to be a nerd. You need to be bold. You need to know stuff. That's the problem. The entry level is not user-friendly, as you said, right? There is not you need to be geeky. You need to set up time. You need to be to tolerate frustrations and so on, right? And you need to keep going until you find it and make it working for you.
Yeah, one thing I think open source generally is really bad at is marketing. And I mean really bad. And I know some people in Ozarch are going to hate me for this, but sometimes the way we market, or things not we, but the things that are marketed in the open source community is shit. Really, it's not attractive. It's not sexy. And the best way to prove that is to just show people what IFC.js did. People look at IFC.js and think, wow, crazy, and it's really a bloody fantastic product, open source product. But their marketing is really cool. They made it fun, colorful, really interesting to look at, Yeah. And the thing is, okay, it's nice, but then people don't even realize there's so many other also tools that are really cool, but just that they get no love because they're ugly. It's like the ugly duckling, that no one wants to look at. Oh well.
Yeah, I agree. Nobody will get offended by that. There is a bit different situation. There are involved people that have that experience, that have been working a lot with marketing. There are companies involving and supporting because they are using IFC.js on their program, on their other softwares and so on. So it's a bit different. So you have people that are investing and putting time. Like you will see next week one of the most important people behind the marketing regarding IFC.js, which on top of Antonio, who everyone knows Antonio. but not everyone knows about Jesus, who is actually, I think, the mastermind behind everything that about marketing on regarding IFCJS, of course, plus what Antonio is doing. But there is not happening by chance what is happening there. It's happening because there is know-how and there are resources dedicated for that. Either it's time or money, one of those, and people that know how to do that, right? Meanwhile, here we have a very talented coder, cannot be a very good marketer either, right? And maybe it can be, but you need to have that time, and it's not easy when you need to juggle between family, work, and then you work already on an open source project. It's already too much, and to add that on top of that marketing as well is not easy, right? So I don't consider that I'm doing marketing, but I'm trying to support open source as much as I can through my videos, and being this platform where people like you come and show me how we are using, and we get more attention and more people interested and willing to join the ranks, right? And it's not easy. It needs resources, it needs a plan and so on. But no matter how you look at the situation, if I look 2 years back, like we come quite a long way. And I do not have any doubt that it will come that day when like you are using mostly open source tools for you at work. It will be possible for normal people that are not the experts or geeks, that this is where I want to help mostly with, like to provide this bridge and to help to make this more user friendly and documented, right? Because there is no, like, there is where you start, right? How you learn by looking at the code Dion wrote, right? Not everyone has the time or the knowledge or the willingness to do that, right? So we need to have a bit better documentation, and sometimes a video could be good, an article, written article or so on. So you are doing your part by talking about these tools on your social media, by contributing with specific code, and by using these tools and providing feedback and just asking these guys, hey, that stuff is not working for me. Maybe Dion did not even think about that use case, right? And he can do something about that, or somebody else might do it, right? So I think, yes, IFCJS, I agree, they are doing a tremendous job, but it's a bit of different situation. And especially because the main developer, Antonio, like, is hired, he has a job where he is actually hired and paid to, and he's using that product at work, right? So you already, he's a quite experienced coder, and like, it's a huge difference, right? Of course, Dion is using this tool at
Can I say
work
something
as well.
really quickly, Petru? I think we have a real opportunity here as an industry, and I'm going to say something, maybe it's maybe a little provocative, but I think most modern companies fail really badly at teaching new employees, and also with skills development of employees. I think if you're a smart company, if you're a modern company, the best way you can upskill your employees is go and send them to work on an open source project. So if you're a construction company, if you're an architectural company, go and reserve your employee for the next 3 months to go and contribute to BlenderBIM. He's going to learn IFC. He's going to learn what BIM is. He's going to learn how to code. He's going to learn how to communicate with others. I mean, it really is that simple. And I think some companies are going to start understanding that, is that hey, the best employees are actually the ones that are contributing to this. So let's set up a budget to contribute to BlenderBIM or to IFC OpenShelf, to IFCJS, and then see the real benefits,
Oh my God, it's so little requirement. If just so little involvement from the company would happen, a huge impact is going to be made. But there are so many things about what you just said, starting with the fact that these funds for this kind of stuff is limited. Regarding the there are not really many coders in architecture and engineering companies, so but it's not even worth to go that rabbit hole. But there are, like, this can be useful, and it will be useful. Just dedicate some 2-3 hours every week, and I don't know, just read about this stuff and talk to these nerds on OSArch, and I don't know, maybe something will happen. You will learn more about this, or I don't know. you will see, like, watch BIMvoice, because you will find tutorials that actually you will be able to use this tool for free and at work, right? Like you doing what you just showed me. There are companies that maybe don't have money for Solibri, right? They can just check. Maybe they don't even check at all, right? They can just use a free tool to check to some degree.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's crazy.
This is a wrap for this time. Thank you, Vukas. It was very nice to talk to you, and I'm really looking forward to our next session.
Me too, Petru. Really, thanks for having me, and really looking forward to the next session. I think we can look at some really, really cool stuff next time as well.
Okay, cool, man.